Hey, I'm not Brooklyn, so I don't have any cutesy, fun intro music to play for y'all. Um, Alright, this is already off to a bad start. Hey, guys, welcome back to the Turntable, episode 3. We've got a great panel for you guys today. We've got a lot of different kinds of music from a lot of different decades, actually. I think that's the first time that we've ever had that happen so far. Got a great panel for you today. Starting off with my main man, Kirk Kolakowski. Kirk, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I feel good. I watched all 5 movies. I'm sorry Cody couldn't
Oh,
be here, but I think we're still got a great show.
yeah. No, it's gonna go great. Thank you for coming, buddy.
Absolutely.
Next, we have Zach Ford. Zach, how
I
you doing?
doing good. I didn't watch the movies, but I did listen to albums on 2x speed. So
Mm, this, you know what? I can't wait. And then, uh, we had him on an episode of the set list, and unfortunately, things didn't go right. So we weren't able to air that. So we asked him to be on the turntable with us, and that is my good friend Dan Baxter.
I
Dan,
did.
how you
I,
doing
I,
today?
I didn't watch any movies or listen to any albums, but I read a bunch of books. I thought that's what this was about. I thought this was like
like
a
just a
book club
bunch
thing.
of books, like no specific books that were required.
Yeah, I just grabbed whatever I could find.
This is going to be the greatest episode of all time. Uh, all right, so here's how this is going to work. We are going to be discussing 5 different albums. Uh, as you can see, there are only 4 of us today, and that's because Brooklyn couldn't be here, as I said earlier. That's because he's a new daddy. Congratulations, Brooklyn. We're very happy for you. Uh, but so, uh, everyone, just real quick, Kirk, what album did you choose?
I chose Paul Simon's Graceland.
Zach, what did you
I
choose?
just get really worried I'm going to screw up the title of my album. I chose Andrew Bird and the Mysterious Production of Eggs.
All right. Dan, what did you bring to the table today?
I chose The Natural Blues by Taj Mahal. Some traffic for you.
I chose Southeastern by Jason Isbell, and Brooklyn chose Fully Completely by the Tragically Hip. So we're going to be starting with Kirk today. Kirk, tell us a little bit more about Graceland and why you picked it.
Yeah, this is I'm sure everybody knows, it's one of Paul Simon's, I think, earlier, maybe like his third or fourth, fifth, something like that, solo album. And it came out in '86, I think. And I just really like this one. This is some of my favorite of his, probably my favorite solo music of his. It just really has a nice blend. It has a cool story, a really interesting story. Actually, we might be able to get into a little bit of how it all came together. It was a kind of a low point in his career, a low point in his personal life, and he was looking to do something fresh and new. And I think he really does that here. The album combines a lot of different things. A lot of obviously the thing you think about most about this album is the South African influences and that kind of music. But there's also a lot of like different American styles. There's some Zydeco in there, some more bluesy stuff, and it's a little more electric than a lot of his stuff he's done before. But it still maintains throughout that like folk feel that you have for Paul Simon. I think it's just some of his most fun music, some of his most just joyous and just kind of catchy music that he's made, but maintaining that feel that of the themes that you get from Paul Simon when you listen to his music. So yeah, I think it's a great album. So I just figured we'd all give it a listen.
I'm going to start us off on this one. I dug this. I knew a few of the songs beforehand. Like, obviously, You Can Call Me Al. Like, that one I knew already. That's kind of one of those, like, radio staple songs, but it's still really good. Even though it's, as you said, like, it's not really something that I expect from Paul Simon, hearing, like, those synths and those compressed drums. Um, but it's really fun. The things that I really liked about this album are the first of all, the lyrics. Paul Simon is just like one of those lyricists that, like, the way that he like forms melodies with his words is just really sharp. I think my favorite example is the opening, "The Boy in the Bubble." Um where it's just like this dichotomy in the lyrics, but it's got that like bouncy quality to it, which is just really sharp and really nice. But then there's things like Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes and Homeless, which has those beautiful harmonies. Like, I love everybody that Paul Simon brought onto this album, for like, to play with and, experiment with. I think everyone brought their A game. It's such a fascinating listen, a lot of fun, great music. I love this pick.
I have listened to Graceland before because I'm not an amateur like Kabar is. I have lived in the society we call
Son of a bitch. I'm gonna get out from under my rock and you.
and just to get dig at Kirk too. Kirk musicking just like he movies, just picking from the canon. We got it. Just the all-time greats.
What did I tell you, Andrew? I knew. Hey, Zach, I listen to music that for good music. I don't find stuff that I could be the first guy to listen to and tell everybody else about it and claim that thing is my own. Okay.
I don't actually listen to anything. I just find titles that people haven't heard of. Look at cool Zach over here. Anyways, Graceland, it's delightful as ever. And what's special about this album is really it should not work. Not only was he not in his prime at all, but there's some like appropriation things that could be pulled upon us. I think there's some songs, and I'll talk about when I do my worst, that do just, I think, a little bit of African appropriation in a way that doesn't work for me. But the rest of it, he's still able to, I think, because he's melding it with so many other sounds, he's making it something new rather than just borrowing from the African culture. And he's finding the right collaboration, so like Lady Smith, Black Mambaza, to bring a little bit of a natural element to it. But yeah, the main thing is it's just joyful. And dance playing, like You Could Call Me Al should be lame as fuck. And it kind of is, but there's something so sincere about the way he's delivering this.
It's like a great dad joke in that sense.
Yeah. But it makes you go along for the ride because one, there's so much technical proficiency to everything that's going on in artistry, but also I said that sincerity that makes you love everything about it. So yeah, I love Graceland as much as every normal person that does it live in America. Yep.
Right. So I feel the same way. Like Graceland is just one of those classic albums. It's one that should be in, I collect vinyl. It should be in your collection. It should be at least listened to a few times in your life. It's a great sunset driving album. I think like it's perfect for that kind of mood. Like when you're leaving work. It's and the African rhythms and the guitar work on it's astounding. And then, you have Paul Simon's whole genius behind it all, just kind of like pulling all the strings, putting everything together. But it's really great. And there's like, I mean, there's a whole bunch of African rock guitarists and bands and stuff. There's one called Hallelujah Chicken Run Band. If you've ever heard of them, it's a great name. But I think
I've never heard of these guys, but I
think they're from Zimbabwe or something, but you can absolutely, it's like, there's little bits of Graceland all throughout it. It's really cool.
Yeah, Graceland really influential. Still like to this day, like Vampire Weekend doesn't exist without Graceland, especially the early albums. I've been listening to the album a lot.
That's really good.
I would say something too. I know Zach said that Paul Simon was in his prime here, and that may be true musically and lyrically, but I think his voice on this album, I think like here's like a full maturity to his voice here, and it's subtle, but you listen to this and I think vocally he's at his prime here. I think this is the best he is vocally, and it may have something to do with the lyrics and everything else come together, but I think his voice sounds better here than it ever has on anything else.
Once he kicked that Garfunkel guy, he just got better and better and better.
Yeah, that willowy wisp of a voice, Art Garfunkel. I also really like looking back on this album in context because of how this kind of sound was starting to permeate in the 80s. Like if you look at this album, you look at Remain in Light by Talking Heads, you look at So by Peter Gabriel, like this kind of sound was starting to really come to the forefront And I think that Graceland probably is. It may not be my favorite of those three albums, but I think that culturally speaking, I think it had the biggest impact, especially in the production. As I said before, the compressed drums in this, um, they were already kind of a thing, but like this was like when it was really starting to bubble and become a lot more commonplace in pop culture. But I think that other albums that try to create that sound still haven't reached that kind of same level that the production on this one does. Like the way that everything's mixed and balanced, it's just really expertly done. There's nothing. Well, there is one song. We'll get to that. But I don't think there's a single song outside of that one where you don't get the full scope of the instrumentation that's being laid out. Like nothing's hidden, nothing's muddy. Um, it's all perfectly clear. Any last thoughts on Graceland? Oh, wait, I should give Brooklyn's thoughts. Because Brooklyn did send me notes on all of the albums that we're talking about today.
You have to read it in his voice, though. So go.
Okay. Brooklyn says, real quick blurb, a lot of influence from Bob Dylan, and most notably for this episode, Harry Belafonte. I kind of see Belafonte. I don't quite know where he's getting Dylan from this.
Maybe just in like the wordiness.
That's probably it.
Yeah, the poetry.
Yeah. I would leave Dan to be the expert on that one since he's the Bob Dylan expert.
I don't know.
Brooklyn's going to Brooklyn.
Okay.
They're close.
Okay. Any last thoughts before we move on to favorite and least favorite on this?
Yeah, I do just have to say, I think it's required of me to shoot back on the whole appropriation thing a little bit, because it wasn't like a situation where he heard this music and was like, oh, I'm taking that. He traveled to South Africa. He met these musicians. He worked with them. He paid them 3 times as much an hour as New York studio musicians were making at the time. So, I mean, he was making sure everything was the level he wanted. He kept them involved. He brought them back to the States with him. He toured with them. So he kept the musicians who inspired him in this involved. At his great peril, when he went to South Africa, it was a big controversy because they were so under apartheid and there was a cultural boycott. And he really faced some backlash. And he was there was a radical anti-apartheid group that actually had him on the top of their assassination list.
Wow.
And it was Stephen Van Zandt who worked closely with these guys who talked them out of killing Paul Simon. Wow. So I mean that's how intense this got for him. So I think like he took some risks, making this music and bringing it to the forefront. I don't think he ever tried to claim anything here as his own. So, I mean, I know it's a controversy and people have different opinions on it, but that's just my take. I think he really worked to make sure the people who originated this music were involved and credited and paid for it.
That's really cool. I had no idea
Very
about almost any of that. That's badass. All right. So, real quick, I'm going to give Brooklyn's favorite, least favorite, and score. Brooklyn's favorite is Under African Skies. He says you get a great sense of sustain and tenderness in his delivery, and the Rolling Toms blend really well with it, with an honorable mention to You Can Call Me Al and Diamonds in the Soles of Her Shoes. His least favorite is Gumboots. He says, and I don't understand what he means by this because I disagree. He says, again with the accordion. They add so much effect on everything else, but when they add the sax, it comes in very raw and unfiltered. His score is an 8 out of 10. Couple of head-scratching decisions, but the peaks are all-time classics. Brooklyn, screw you. The accordion is great. My favorite song is Boy in the Bubble. I love that Zydeco sound. It's something that I've kind of discovered is very much up my alley. But as I also said before, lyrically, just like the the dynamics in there of like this just like terrible situation, and then the other lyrics about like the pop charts, pop artists rolling up the charts. It's just like really, really interesting. The one that was my least favorite was That Was Your Mother. I, that one just kind of was there. It didn't really have something that stood out to me as much as the other ones. Like originally I was gonna go with I Know What I Know, but like that at least had things that I remembered afterwards. Um, so that's my thought. Yeah, I agree. Score wise, though, 8 out of 10. Um, the highs are incredibly high. Uh, so, yeah, oh, simple thoughts for me on this. On this one, Zach, let's go to you.
It's funny because I'm going the opposite of like you in Brooklyn, where my favorite is I Know What You I Know. For every reason, I don't have any real reason. Sometimes music just hits you and it is catchy. And my least favorite is Under African Skies, because to me that's where the like possible appropriation makes the most sense. Where I feel like he's doing a vocalization that is kind of trying to mime African singers in a way that's not natural to himself, to where it just makes me a little uncomfy. You can borrow sounds, but you don't mimic. And to me, it was getting a little closer to mimicking. So,
all right, Dan.
What about a score?
Oh yeah, your score, Zach.
8.437.
Great. Never failed to disappoint me, Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite's Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes. I just think it's a really enjoyable song. I don't know. Don't got much more than that. It's one of the ones I've always kind of returned to, on that album if I'm ever just kind of looking for a quick hit of Graceland, But I'm for least favorite also probably Under African Skies for those very similar reasons. Just it seems a little unnatural having a little Paul Simon be doing a lot of that, And I love this album. I really love it. I'm gonna give it a 9 on my end.
Nice. And Kirk, you're the one who brought this to us.
Yeah. I know I'll get flack from Zach for picking one of the singles off the album, but if I go through and I list this, the song I'm going to most likely to stop on and replay and listen to the most is "Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes." I just love that the combination of the opening vocals and then how it goes into the more traditional song, more traditional Paul Simon song, I should say. Just the way the music comes together. The bass line is great. The bass line throughout the whole album is fantastic. But I just love the lyrics of the song. When they said they end up sleeping in the doorways, the bodegas, and the lights of Upper Broadway, just the way that rolls off, off his tongue is just so good. And all the lyrics flow through so good. Even though I like so much of it, like a lot of Paul Simon doesn't make any sense. It's still beautiful to listen to. So that's my favorite. My least favorite, again, I mean, there's no losers on this album for me. I enjoy them all. If I had to pick one, I might say All Around the World or The Myth of Fingerprints, and that might just be because it's the last track on the album, and I'm like, ready for something else, and I have to pick one, so that's probably going to be my pick, but there's nothing on here that I wouldn't choose to listen to multiple times. And as far as my score, again, like I said, I love this. This is my favorite. I don't know if it's my favorite. It may be my favorite of anything Paul Simon's done, but it's definitely my favorite solo album. So I'm going to give that a 9.25.
Okay.
Love
it. Love it. All right. Let's move on to the next album, which is going to be Zach's. Zach, tell us more about the mysterious production of Agnes.
Yeah, Andrew Bird's one of my favorite musicians. This is what I call his first real album. It's not his first actual album, but he did with like Hands of Glory or stuff, like kind of like old-timey ragtimey music before this. This is more when he went like straight indie rock with it and still adapting some of those sounds and the fill sounds to it. I watched him live a few times, and he does a lot of looping, which you can't quite hear in the record, but so seeing it live and being able to connect all the violin sounds, and when he violin picks, and the guitar and the whistling, those will all be recorded on loop live as he starts, and then playing with the pedal throughout. So he's still creating, this very lush music, all as by one person, which is always impressive. No one, he's our best whistler around. He did the whistling part in the Muppets, in 2011 Muppets, where they had.
Wait, did he really?
Yeah, that's Andrew Bird whistling. So that's very important to me. And I'm not a lyrical person at all. And so you'll barely hear me talk about it because that's just not the way my mind works. It doesn't really pay attention to lyrics too much. I do hear words as far as melodically and how they work as part of the music and as an instrument themselves. And I feel like he is like one of the best rhymers there are. And palindrome, whatever. I'm blanking because I'm talking fast, but he, like My Disney Eye, Dewey Bride, What Is Tried, just like masterwork use of rhyming, just as the way they sound. And I've been obsessed for 15 years on the way he says monsters in that. He says monsters, and that's how I react. But I don't know, it's calming to me. This is one of my like deep breath albums, I call them, where I just can take a deep breath and find my grounding. And I mean, I honestly think his second best work was 2 years ago. So keep checking him out. This was almost 20 years ago at this point. But he's still working up and making great stuff. So great dresser as well. Just guy in suits, good looking guy.
All right, the floor is open for anyone who wants to start.
I'll go. I got a couple quick things. He's just a true musician through and through. This is an album that was introduced to me in college, and it was one that like I spun or listened to like nonstop, and it's just something that has a nice like nostalgic place for me. And actually, Andrew Barr was in a student film that I was working on, and we were trying to get one of these songs for that project.
Were you really?
Yeah, for Misconception, and we were trying to get something for the opening credits for it, but it we didn't have any time or money to really do it. But I think this is a great album, top tier whistler. Like there's I know you just said it, but like we really need to double down on that. He's just one hell of a whistler.
I'll put my money on the table and say that he's a fantastic whistler as well. Okay, so this is one of those situations where I respect the album more than I necessarily like it. I see the artistry. I understand what makes it good. I will say, I think the front half of this album is a little bit stronger than the back half of this album. Because I think the back half of this album kind of starts to blend together a little bit, except for Skin Is My banger song. I did notice the looping now that you mention it. It did click for me.
Especially in fake palindromes, you hear the violin that
was honestly my favorite part of the entire album. That little violin piece was so fucking cool. It's one of those things where like I think Baroque or like chamber pop or that kind of style is not made for me, which seems like it should be right up my alley. But it just it never seems to click.
I feel like you can use the word Baroque next to a picture of you and it would make sense. Baroque as a person would look like you.
Well, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it. Thank you. So, you know who this actually like really reminded me of? For some reason, it reminded me if it was a classically trained, and by I mean like musically, classically trained Jack Johnson. Like, and I just pissed off my guest. But it kind of had that Jack Johnson-esque kind of like playfulness in some of the lyrics. Like, I'm not thinking that Andrew Bird's gonna release, chocolate banana pancakes or whatever the hell that song is called. But it did kind of have that, that light fun to it. Just if Julia Holter decided that they were going to collaborate. So I respect the album, not necessarily one of my favorites.
I had never heard of this album. I'd actually never heard of the artist, which obviously is par for the course for Zach, because Zach's not going to risk letting anybody else claim something he introduces.
You didn't go to college in the late aughts, why?
But no, I actually enjoyed this album, and just peek behind the curtain a little bit. We did have to reschedule the show once, and I listened to this in preparation day of the original scheduled show, and didn't get a chance to go back to it. So my memory isn't completely fresh on every song, but my overall thoughts on it, I really do enjoy that. It feels like he's trying something new every song. Like no two songs really feel alike, and everyone kind of has its own thing and its own energy to it. And I kind of like it. Like there's I think Andrew used the word playfulness. There's like a playfulness. You're like, well, let's see if this works. Let's try this. Let's throw that in there. And I kind of like that almost improvisational feel it has to it. I don't know how it actually is, but it kind of feels that way. Like, hey, let's throw this at the wall and see if it sticks. So I enjoy that, and I do feel like it at times it does feel like he's like a more classically trained musician. Sometimes a little more jazzy, sometimes a little more poppy. So I kind of like how it switched up. So yeah, I enjoyed this album, and I appreciate getting a chance to listen to it.
All right, real quick, Brooklyn's thoughts. He didn't give he forgot to give a little blurb on this one, but he did give his score and his
F you, Zach.
Yeah. So any last thoughts on the mysterious production of Eggs by Andrew Bird before we move on?
Best album title of the night too.
Definitely.
Honestly,
Mysterious production of Eggs, better than Graceland as an album title.
Honestly, I don't disagree.
Where do those eggs come from? No one knows. It's a mystery.
I completely agree.
On the great album cover,
boo.
I actually have it hanging
Boo.
on my wall using that
Boo.
album cover. It's just like some alpaca in a red blanket. I recommend it.
All
Great
right.
art.
So with that, we're going to get into favorite, least favorite, and score. Brooklyn's favorite song is Opposite Day. He says the one that caught his attention on first listen, it's Zach Core, Loop, and All, with an honorable mention for a nervous tick motion of the head to the left and Skin is My. His least favorite is Slash equals Slash. He says it just doesn't grab your attention like an opener should, which it's a prologue. It's a prologue.
It's
Like,
not a
come on.
song.
He says 7.5 out of 10. Is this my cup of tea? Not particularly, but I dig the production overall. So Zach, let's actually start with you on this one, since this is your album.
Okay. So my favorite song is Sauvé. It's possibly one of my 10 favorite songs of all time. Maybe because it leads the album and it just gets me right into the Andrew Bird mood. But I find it just very lovely, and the melody of the instruments going into the song, the dun 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 dun. It is the epitome of taking a deep breath for me. And then my least favorite, once again, I like every song on this album, but I'm just gonna go with MX Missiles. Just it's the most forgettable to me. No other reason behind that.
Let's go to Kirk next.
Yeah, again, this is another one where I didn't think there were any real losers. I could appreciate every song on the album. My favorite is Banking on a Myth, just for my personal taste. I just love the drum beat on that. I love it has kind of like that nightclub jazz trio kind of feel with it, but with that heavier guitar. So I like that. If I have to pick a least favorite, I'd probably say maybe Tables and Chairs. Because I do agree with you, Andrew. It does lose a little bit of steam at the end. I feel like that one maybe is the least original sounding of the rest of the tracks. But again, it's not a bad song.
Dan, let's go to you.
Banking on a Myth is my favorite song on the album as well. You know, just again for the same reasons you were just saying. It's just it's one of my favorites. And again, this album takes me way back, and that's probably one of the ones that takes me back furthest. And then MX Missiles is also my least favorite on it, because like I was, right before this, I was looking at it and I could hear a lot of them in my head. And same thing, it's that one didn't come to me until I played it.
The one I look at the song list and have no memory of what.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Real quick. I don't think I got the score from anybody. So Zach, what's your score?
9.88.
I'm so glad I allowed this. Kirk.
I'll give it a 7.5.
Dan.
I'll meet in the middle at 8 here.
And so my favorite one is Fake Palindromes for exactly the reason that Zach brought up earlier. That little instrumental part just lives in my head now. And then my least favorite was the naming of things. That's the one that I just can't remember whenever I think about the songs. That's just me though. So I'm gonna give it a 7. As I said before, I respect this album. I see the artistry in it. Just not one I'm going to go back to. So, with that being said, we're going to move on to my album next, which is Southeastern by Jason Isbell. So, if you've been watching the channel, you'll know that I have talked about Jason Isbell a lot. He is one of my favorite artists of all time. I've seen him in concert now twice. And the thing that I really love about him is that he is just an absolutely fantastic songwriter. Like lyrically speaking, I think he's one of the best lyricists working today. He creates incredible visuals with just his words. Like one of my favorite lyrics of all time is on Live Oak on this song, which was when I told her, her eyes flickered like the sharp steel of a sword. Like just that, it's just so detailed and it's incredibly well written. Plus, there's just a warm weariness to his voice. Like you can tell that he's been through a lot just by the way he delivers his vocals, and it kind of just like pulls you in. This is an album that is a little bit more straightforward. It sounds a little bit more intimate than some of the projects that he's worked on later, where there is a slight more electric guitar and a little bit more rock in there. But I genuinely think that the strength of this song is of this album is the songwriting. Like my great example of this is Elephant, which is this song about a woman dying of cancer and the relationship that she has with the narrator. And it is just like a heartbreaking piece. So this is Jason Isbell, fantastic. One of my favorite artists of all time. The floor is open. What are your thoughts?
Everybody rushing to
yeah, right.
First, because this is the other one that I listened to earlier and didn't get a chance to come back to. So I'm more big picture on this. I'm not a big, and I know this isn't like the most strictly country album, but or artist. I'm not a big country fan at all. So as soon as you bring anything country, especially like modern country, you bring anything like with a country, anything to me, I'm very wary. But I really like this. I feel like he turns down the country aspects just enough to make it acceptable. I think he has a voice, like Andrew said, that you could take seriously. He doesn't have that like kind of that voice that like every pop country artist has. So it is deeper and more soulful, and it feels real. And also his lyrics are a lot more deep and meaningful. And so yeah, I really enjoyed the album. I think that he is a really good storyteller. I think that's really captured. Like you can tell, like it felt real. It felt like if you listen, it kind of reminded me like if you listen to like a Creedence ballad, in those songs, like where like even though you know it's a made up story, if it is or not, it feels real. There's some kind of genuine feeling to it. So that's what I appreciate about him. Like everything he's singing feels like it's coming from his real life. So I appreciate that just earnestness and the genuine connection he has to the music. So yeah, overall I give this album pretty high grade.
I would say it's really the true historic kind of country in like the Towns Van Zandt way. It's just country has morphed into
absolutely.
Like this is definitive country.
When I'm talking about like country that would come out.
No, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
This is more a statement on how genres have warped and why can this not be the representative country instead of what is played on pop radio? Because that is, people who say they hate country music, it's not this. They skip country, which is a sticky term, but it is what it is. I mean, I love Jason Isbell. Once again, lyrically, I may know like a line at a time that can mean something to me, but as a whole, that's just not how I connect. But he can deliver the emotion of his words through the sound. So I cannot fully understand what every word he's saying or memorize, but I can still feel the same emotions by the power of his voice, by the melodies he chooses. So they work in tandem very well. And I haven't listened to this since probably 2013 or 2014. So it was nice to return to, and it was very lovely, and probably I would say his best album.
It's probably top 3 for me. It's hard. It's very hard for me to choose though. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Not for me. I respect the hell out of him. I think he's he's a brilliant lyricist first and foremost. I'd say in my book, it just didn't resonate with me as much as I don't know. I talk to a lot of people about music and people suggest him a lot, and I've definitely like dipped my toes in, and I'm always looking. I listen to a lot of different things, and the only thing I'm usually ever trying to look for is something that like really like jumps out and really surprises me. And I just didn't feel surprised by much on this. I did love a lot of the lyric work, and there were a couple that I had recognized before, but just for my personal taste, this one wasn't my jam.
Fair enough. I am very disappointed right now.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. I feel bad.
I'm the only person on this call who knew who you were beforehand, and I picked the album that you were like, it's fine.
I'm just being honest. I don't want to lie to you about it.
It's fine. I appreciate that. Brooklyn, some quick thoughts on this. He really liked Cover Me Up. He says it's surprising for an opener, deep, slow impact. That would reward longtime fans. Different days he goes into his music nerd side. He's like, I love the open G tuning. It meshes well with the piano. Songs that she sang in the shower, he goes, Pearl Jam, is that you? Which I don't understand, but whatever. The thing that he said that actually really kind of pissed me off was when he was talking about Relatively Easy, the closing song on this album, which is slowly grown to be one of my all-time favorite songs. He says, it's a good song, but I'd swap the opener and the closer. Considering how slow the rest of the album is, seems a bit too upbeat to end it. Which I'm like, I think Cover Me Up is like the best way to open this album personally, because it's so sparse, but his voice is so strong and powerful on it. And it is probably the most vulnerable song that he's ever released. So I think that's a perfect song to drag you in with. And then I think Relatively Easy is like this beautiful piece about like self-reflection and how things may be hard, but when you think about things in the grand scheme, that we have it relatively easy. Especially when you get to the verse about his friend that that died, and it really puts things into perspective. I think that that's an absolutely insane take from Brooklyn that to swap the two of them. Um, can I get anyone else has have an opinion on this before we move on?
I think "Cover Me Up" is a weird beginning, and I will say that
Really?
it's my favorite. But I don't know if they need to be switched. But it is like putting you right into the emotional
Right in.
trenches rather than working its way into it. And I mean, not to spoil, but it's still my favorite song and probably my favorite Jason Isbell song. Listening to it in isolation, but on album, it's like, you're really gonna start with this right away?
Okay.
Sometimes you gotta save your best hitter for cleanup. You just don't lead off with them.
A baseball reference from Zach Ford, everybody. All right, I guess
I
I'm.
guess they bat third now in this modern era of baseball.
All right, let's move on to scores, favorites, and least favorite. Brooklyn, his favorite song on this one is New South Wales. He says songs in this arrangement are so pretty, and he crushes it. His peaceful, easy feeling. His least favorite is Super 8. He says it's the song to play after the concert is over and everyone is trying to leave. He gives it a 9 out of 10. He says, given how saturated this genre was upon release, it is the king of Oklahoma. Yeah, great. Thanks, Brooklyn. I actually agree. Super 8 is my least favorite song on this album. It's the one that just kind of seems the most out of place. As much as I enjoy it, it also seems like the most forced. Like somebody at the record company or Dave Cobb, his producer, was like, we gotta get like something upbeat in this album or else people are not going to listen to it, and they kind of just wrote that on a napkin. But for me, my favorite song, as much as Relatively Easy has like slowly climbing that list for me, it's still Elephant. I think Elephant is just so expertly written, and that howl basically at the end is just such a powerful piece of music, in my opinion. Let's go to Zach next.
I already said "Cover Me Up" is my favorite. It's just my favorite Jason Isbell song in general. I think that sparseness is very important to really get the emotional feeling of that song. It sounds like a desperate wail of a song to me in a way that I really connect to and moved by. And then my least favorite is also Super 8. I think it's just cheesy and it's like heartland American rock genericism kind of way.
Kirk.
Yeah, my favorite is Live Oak. I think you mentioned that. I think that just has like that really deep sound in the music and his voice, and also it's about murder, and all the best country songs are about murder. So that you got to pick that one. For least favorite, it's crazy. I'm also going to go for Super 8. Almost the exact same reasons you said, Andrew. It feels like this is the closest song on here to like modern pop country, and I didn't hate it because the lyrics are still really good. But it still has that sound like this is the one we're putting out for radio play. This is the one we're putting out for the masses to everybody kind of do whatever they do and drink their beer to. And it kind of just lacks the soul of the rest of the album, but it's still a really fun song.
And quick, Zach, score.
8.23 repeated.
Kirk, score.
I'll give it a solid 7.
All right, Dan.
Yeah, favorite just because I had heard it before a few times. I think is "Cover Me Up" is the one I was most familiar with, and to go with the team here, I think Super 8 was was the least exciting one for me on that. So I just didn't a good amount of it didn't grab me, and that was like pretty far away from the rest of them. So
and score
6 on this. For me. I'm sorry.
Oh.
It was a 5.
Thanks. I made it better. It's a 9 for me. I think his next album, Something More Than Free, became a better album experience, but this one has like the singles like that are like the higher highs for me. All right. And we will be moving on to Dan, tell us
Yes.
more about the Natural Blues by Taj Mahal.
Right. I picked Natural Blues by Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal is still a blues artist, but grew up in Massachusetts. His mother was in a gospel choir. His father was an Afro-Caribbean jazz arranger, so he just kind of brought a lot of unique styles and rhythms to blues music. And as we were talking about with Andrew Bird being like one of the top whistlers, this dude is probably one of the best clappers, and just a phenomenal harmonica player as well. And on this album, it's just it's got some strong ones. He did a traditional tune, but reworked Karina into just Corinna, I think is his version of it. Jesse Ed Davis on guitar was a phenomenal session guitarist who worked with a lot of people like Clapton and George Harrison. Al Cooper, piano player, did the organ on Like a Rolling Stone. He's on this album playing piano a couple of times, and it's if people ask what kind of albums they need for their collection, this is one I suggest.
I dug this. I really liked. I really liked the. This is one that I think that the latter half of the album was a little bit stronger than the first half of the album.
Sure.
Because the first half of the album had a couple songs that had very, very similar styles, but I like that blues kind of style.
Cool.
I like people like Howlin' Wolf. I like people like oh my god, I am blanking on his name so hard right now. It'll come to me later. But the thing that I think I liked most about this album was Taj Mahal himself. I think that his voice and his delivery is just really gripping. Um, y- you kind of know who it is the moment that you hear his voice, and you can tell that he influenced a lot of other people down the pipeline.
Yeah.
Like you can hear people trying to be him. Um, Speaking of which, did am I the only person who noticed a really familiar bass line um, from "Ain't That a Lot of Love"? It
Yeah.
sounds like "Give Me Some Lovin'."
Yeah, for sure. That and She Caught the Katy, I think, were his versions were kind of pulled into the Blues Brothers at some points.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. She Caught the Katy, I think, is like the opening credits of Blues Brothers, but Blues Brothers did a version of it, and it's a cover, but it's his. He like made it his own and made it like what the big known version of that is.
That's actually really cool. I didn't know recognize that. Um, but yeah, as I said, the second half of the album, once you get to going up to the country, no, sorry, done changed my way of living. Like that is a 7-minute song that if like in lesser hands, I think could have become a slog. But he's just so good at delivering that song. It's just it's really good. It's an album that I don't think I would listen to almost anything outside of the album as a whole, which I really respect.
My experience with Taj Mahal before is I had to look up the song name because it was going to fit. Is his from 2008, "Never Let You Go," which is it was like a reggae kind of tinge song with Los Lobos that was on a Taste magazine sampler CD. And I listen to that song a lot and love, but for some reason never fully went back for the Taj Mahal experience, except some casual, I think, listening there as well. What's interesting is my favorite part of this album, somebody said, is that isn't a straight blues song that I was just mentioning. It has the reggae bass line to it, and everything else is when he kind of melds other genres. The end of this album, it gets very soul. and kind of Otis Redding-ish, and that's where I really started to connect with it. And I think that's what sets him apart from, because blues is such a specific genre, like not the rules, but the sound of it is very laid out, that I do think it can, unless you're an expert listening to it all the time, if you're just listening to it casually, it kind of blends. But it's great vibes. But when you get more into it, then you hear the nuances, almost said nuances, like a dumbass. But so what sets him apart from really the more famous blues singers of that time, like Buddy Guy and B.B. King, is I find his voice more emotional, especially in those soul songs. So it's a little more heart-wrenching. So I liked it overall, but need more time with it.
And I was talking to Dan before we started the show. I really don't have a ton to say about this. I listened to the album. I really liked it. Just because I've obviously, listened to blues and heard blues before, but I've never sat down and listened to a complete album like this, especially from an artist like this. So I don't feel qualified to make a whole ton of comments on it, other than I really enjoyed it. I thought it, like you said, I think he just has a great voice. His personality really shines through the music, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, overall, I thought it was a great album.
And let me see what Brooklyn had to say about this. Yeah, he just gave favorite song and least favorite song and score for this one. So any last thoughts about The Natural Blues by Taj Mahal? One thing I will say is the fact that this man went on for like decades and decades of music is
Still going.
impressive.
Still going.
It's amazing. Yeah, much respect to Taj Mahal. That's freaking
Those
awesome.
blues musicians just keep it riding.
They just keep going.
They know how to live. Yeah.
They really do. Okay, so Dan, let's start with you.
Okay.
Favorite, least favorite score?
Favorite is probably Corinna, just because it's probably the one I've spent the most time with. And least favorite is, I don't know. Like I love this album dearly, so it's kind of hard. But probably Good Morning, Miss Brown. I don't know. Like just more the rest of the album kind of grabs me, I think. And I'm gonna go a 9 on this as well.
Okay. Real quick, Brooklyn, his favorite song is "Done Changed My Way of Living." He says the sound of it's the sound that Black Keys and Eric Clapton strive for. The guitar riff, the delivery, comfortable groove, the polyrhythm halfway through the song. Absolutely love it. His least favorite is "Ain't That a Lot of Love." This would be a perfect closer if it wasn't for the bass line. It's one note and it's octave. Tired of it before it got to the chorus. You're like, God damn it, Brooklyn. He says 9 out of 10, a showcase of the spectrum of blues. Kirk, let's go to you.
Okay. Yeah, my favorite was "I Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Steal My Jelly Roll." I think that maybe just to my admittedly untrained ear, might be the one of this kind of blues sound I'm most familiar with. So I gravitate toward that a little more. My least favorite, again, there's no losers on this album, so there's nothing I really said it like. I would say "You Don't Miss Your Water Till Your Well Run Dry" is probably the one I connected the least with. But I'll say this again for the fourth time: it's not a bad song. It's just, like I said, the one I gravitate to the least.
Oh yeah. Also, score.
I will give this one I'll also give this one a 7, solid 7.
Okay, Zach, we went to you, right?
No, you haven't.
Yeah, let's go to Zach then.
Okay. My favorite is "You Don't Miss Your Water," Kirk's least favorite song. I think because that to me, I was just like, man, I'm gonna listen to Otis for like one song. It was just some deep emotional soul that was much more at my alley. And then my least favorite, I've lost my notes app, was "Going Up to the Country," which to me is like the kind of song you play and at the end be like, yep, that was a blues song. And it was just didn't have much more memorable than it just sounded like the genre. Okay.
And your score?
7.6. Neat.
Very clean. So my favorite song on here, you don't miss your water till your well runs dry. There's just something about that one that's just like the soul and the blues mixed together, like incredibly well. Just like runs really solid for me. Uh, and my least favorite is Going Up to the Country, Paint My Mailbox Blue. That's the one song where I really kind of started to feel feel the album. Um, so it is a 9 out of 10 for me. I really dig it. Great album experience. So we're gonna go to Brooklyn's album. I figured that you know, I may as well have him up here since he's not actually here to defend himself. But he did leave me a little audio message about it.
Hey guys, sorry I wasn't able to make the show this month. The album that I had submitted for the panel was Fully Completely from the Tragically Hip. This came out in 1992, was their fourth studio album, and it came off of the success of Road Apples from the year before. And a lot of fans of this band pick either Road Apples or Fully Completely as their favorite. The reason that I choose Fully Completely is that of all the tracks on the record, 6 of these got released as singles and are still played on the radio quite a bit in Canada. So I'll kind of talk about those 6. Courage, the opener. A lot of fans describe this one as their favorite song to hear live. It just kind of hits a little bit different, especially you get the guitar and the drums in it and whatnot. Looking for a Place to Happen is just like a very solid, like late 90s rock tune. At the 100th Meridian does a really good job of setting things up for later in the album. You kind of get a little bit of Gord's emotion in the song. And then you get into the other singles being Fully Completely the title track, and I think that's one that Gord really gets to like pour out all of his emotion, especially when you get into that chorus. And then from a songwriting perspective, the other 2 singles being 50 Mission Cap and We Kings, I think just tell really cool stories. 50 Mission Cap talks about like Bill Marinko and this curse with the Toronto Maple Leafs involving his death, and it really kind of instills this mythicism with Gord, and that even if you don't necessarily believe the story to be 100% true, like you respect it for the story being told. Wheat Kings is kind of on the polar opposite of it. It's a very like raw, minimalistic approach to it, just the guitar and the steel guitar as well. And then you get that really nice chorus, Wheat Kings and Pretty Things. Let's just see what the morrow brings. It reminds me a lot of like Vienna and kind of the just like remember like what is to come and what.
All right. So with that being said, I'm shocked that this band debuted in the 80s, in like 84, I think it was. Because, boy, does this sound a lot like REM to me. It truly, it was like REM meets Gin Blossoms with a sprinkle of Pearl Jam. And I don't want to be disrespectful. He cannot curse. He is not a good cursor. There are multiple times throughout the album where he curses, and I'm like, wow, this sounds really out of place. It reminded me of when Olivia Rodrigo tries to curse in one of the songs. And
because his voice sounds like this, like fuck.
A little bit.
Yeah.
There's something about this album, especially in the first half, that I just could not get into it. And I've heard other songs by the Tragically Hip before. Some songs that are actually like truly great, phenomenal songs. I don't know. This one just doesn't necessarily work for me. There's a few songs here and there that I think were really good, but as a whole experience, I didn't quite love it. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was pretty bored most of the time listening to this. I by the time I got to two or three tracks in, I'm like, is this really all it's going to be? I mean, the sound is really repetitive. Song to song, you're just hearing the same thing. And I have to apologize. They may get great, like these songs may like really pick up in the last like quarter or third of them, but like most of them, I was like, I've heard enough. Like I think in the first 10 seconds of every song, you heard everything you're going to get from that song. I think I agree with, I don't know necessarily about him swearing, but I think his voice is kind of boring. There was not a lot of, life in his voice. And I don't know. I feel like I agree with you totally. You hear a lot of influences. It reminds me like the fact this came out in 1992 makes perfect sense. I remember like in the early 90s, like in the local Pittsburgh music scene, there were a bunch of sound alike bands that would pick and choose from, whatever was big at the time, but they just didn't have it behind it. And, I go to, local music festivals, I would hear this band, 4 times in a row. Just that kind of just level right there the whole time. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Brooklyn. And maybe this is what Brooklyn's like one of those like real like hyper into music. Maybe this is like a musician's band where like if you know all the technical aspects of everything that's happening, it's like there's something more behind it. But as a amateur listener, there was very little here for me.
I can explain it
Yeah.
very easily why Brooklyn likes this, because Brooklyn go to Canada all the time. And Canada, man, loves Tragically Hip.
They love Tragically
And I have no idea what they're doing with themselves. Like it doesn't work. Like you don't have to claim your own genre. It's okay. You can like some of the 90s alternative bands. You don't have to say, no, the Canadian one, Tragically Hip, are the true alt-rock gods. Canada, it's okay. Just chill out. But Brooklyn can't help himself but be Canada all the time. Most times if you request some music or a song you can go to their Spotify page and it takes you 3 seconds to find Signs of Canada. It's like in the album cover, or there's just like a big flag on the profile picture. But it's always there. The voice is weird, mainly because I think it doesn't meld with the guitars at all. It's like you're putting Michael Stipe with a grungier sound behind it, kind of like a rip-off grungier sound that just doesn't meld together at all, and just makes his voice come off a little irksome. So yeah, I went in optimistic because I know there's such a huge thing, and I think I've experienced some of their later songs that I maybe kind of liked, but yeah, this I just maybe because probably a lot of us are very familiar with the alternative rock of the 90s that this just seems like it's ripping it off in a way.
Yeah. So this is another album I had heard before, and a couple of my friends over the years have tried to get me into the hip, and I've this and maybe one other album are about as deep as I've gone. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. They've always kind of seemed to me like time aside and music aside, but as an entity, they always seemed kind of like Canada's answer to the Grateful Dead. But instead of writing about cowboys and like other folk heroes, they're writing about hockey players and other maybe Canadian folk heroes. So I don't know, just like they've got that really rabid fan base, and it seems like a similar thing to me. But I don't know. It's it was fun revisiting, I'll say.
Yeah, as you said, their fan base is really big. Like Some of their songs are apparently some of the most played songs of all time in Canadian radio.
Wow.
Um,
Was that like them and the Guess Who and Neil Young?
and The Weeknd. Um,
Right.
but any last thoughts on Fully Completely by the Tragically Hip before we move on? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. Okay. Uh, third episode in a row where the one person who couldn't show up had a similar reaction.
Maybe that's for the best.
I heard about Scott's experience.
All right, so we're gonna get Brooklyn's thoughts and opinions on this, and surprise, surprise, Brooklyn rated this album a 10 out of 10. His favorite song was Wheat Kings. Didn't really give a reason. And his least favorite, Looking for a Place to Happen, he says, makes me want to listen to 50 Mission Cap more. So, Brooklyn, I love you. Congratulations on becoming a daddy. You're going to be a great father. You're going to introduce your child to a lot of great music. My least favorite one, I'm going to start with my least favorite here, is At the 100th Meridian. God, it's not that long of a song, but it just repeats over and over and over again, and it's not even catchy to me. Best is Locked in the Trunk of a Car. Like, that was the one where I was like, oh, finally, this album's actually revving up to something. So I'm going to give this album like a 6.5 out of 10. It's good. It's got good moments. It's not a bad album per se. But man, it's not great. Let's go to Dan.
Yeah, so I think my favorite was probably also Wheat Kings. I think that's one of the big ones. That's one of the ones that, you know, again, I'm familiar with, and I'm kind of just going on memory here, you know. I want to say The Wherewithal was one that I didn't love on that. And my score is going to be a 6 on this as well.
Zach, let's go to you.
My favorite is Courage, probably because it's the first song and I was still pretty hopeful going into it. And also, it is like the closest to an REM song in a way that I kind of like. And my least favorite is Lionize because he sings live for a long time. It's annoying as fuck. It's like Lionize, and they just repeat it, and it's really obnoxious. I give it a 4.8.
Wow. Kirk.
Okay. Every other album, it was hard to pick the least favorite. This one was really hard to pick a favorite. I guess I'll also go with Locked in the Trunk of a Car because of the rules are I have to pick one. And I think that was the one that had the most meat on the bones, even though there wasn't a lot there. And also my least favorite is the At the 100th Meridian because that's the point I was like, oh my God, is this album is? That song is like a prank. Like he hits the guitar hits once and then you get it again. And then you get it again, and then you get it again. I'm like, oh my God, how long is this going to go? It's like you know when you go to the restaurant and they're putting the cheese on, and like say when, and you just don't tell them when. That was the opening riff of that song. So yeah, I'm sorry, Brooklyn. I wouldn't go as far to say this is the Pogie Beach of turntable, but it might be close. I'm going to give it a 4.5.
Wow. Okay, that's harsh. You did not have to listen to Samia, Kirk. Just be thankful that you didn't have to listen to that one. All right, so
It's a good album. I'm pro Samuel.
With that being said, guys, thank you so much. Real quick, the last thing I'm going to ask from y'all is out of this experience, aside from the album that you picked, what was your favorite that you listened to? For me, I'm probably going to go with the Natural Blues. I think as an album experience as a whole, I really enjoyed it. Let's go to Zach.
Yeah, my favorite would be Jason Isbell because even though it's one I heard before, I said it's been a long time. It was nice to connect to it again. So.
Let's go to Dan.
Mine's the Andrew Bird album, just because it's similar reasons. You know, I've got Graceland, I've got Natural Blues. I'm, you know, I can listen to those whenever, but it was a real treat getting reminded of that one, and I'm gonna have to pick it up for sure.
And Kirk.
I think the three of you all picked really good albums. Everybody present here brought me something that I liked, and I think there's positives and good things and things I'll take from that. And I want to revisit all three of your artists. So thank you for, especially Dan and Zach. Thank you for introducing those to me. But I think I am going to say that Jason Isbell is my favorite of three, just because it really resonated, and it was the biggest surprise. It was the one I did not expect to like, and I really enjoyed it. So.
You just picked him because he's in a Scorsese film. I get it.
Really good. He's really great. He won the battle of country singers in the Scorsese movie because he's a lot better than Sturgill Simpson.
Well, all right. Thank you all for watching so much. Thank you so much for coming on. Kirk, Zach, I know that we can find you in the movie trivia community, like things like Roundtable, also just like anything that pops up. Dan, is there anywhere that we can follow you? Any projects that you have?
Yeah. So pretty much on any kind of platform as B-Sides Live, just all together. TikTok, I stream listening to records and just talking about music about 5 times a week. That's probably the best place to find me.
I have subscribed to Dan's channel. It is a really fun, really interesting channel.
It's a
I
really
learn
good
a lot
group over there.
Yeah. So, with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andrew Barr. Keep on rocking.